Hello there. Welcome to part 2 of reviewing Every Godzilla Movie, where today we'll be looking at Godzilla Raids Again, the second movie of the Showa era. This is the first Godzilla movie to feature another monster in the form of Angrius. It was the original design for Godzilla before they made him more bipedal. So without further ado, let's dive into this, starting with a breakdown of the plot. Enjoy. The movie starts with a plane going down next to a mysterious island. Tsukioka changes his plane's course and lands near the island to pick the pilot up. Up on the island, they hear a familiar roar and find another Godzilla, who must have also been awoken by a hydrogen bomb. However, this time he's fighting another massive kaiju with a spiky armored shell. The pilots escape before the monsters both tumble into the sea. Back at the mainland, a group of scientists, including Professor Yamane from the previous movie, try to identify the mysterious foe Godzilla was battling. They recognize it as an Ankylosaurus, or at least that's what the subtitles say. This is a bit confusing, because I'm not sure if it's meant to be an Ankylosaurus or not, because the description says it is, but they're carnivorous and bigger than Ankies. As well as that, if it's an original dinosaur like Godzilla, why did the subtitles call him Angulus instead of Angrius? They call Gojira Godzilla, so what's the reason behind this? Anyway, I'm just going to call this guy Angrius for the rest of the video to avoid confusion. Weird tangent aside, they decide upon a plan to defeat Godzilla. They create a light bomb that will lure him away from populated areas. However, for it to work properly, there has to be nothing else to distract him. Thus, when they find his location on course for the city of Osaka, they evacuate the area and turn off every light in the city. When Godzilla shows up, they fly by him with some jets to get him to turn away and then detonate the bomb, which manages to lure the kaiju out of the city and back into the sea, with the lighthouse being the only casualty. Meanwhile, some prisoners who had to be moved out of their old cells due to the evacuation manage to escape their prison truck. The police quickly give chase, and eventually they drive into an abandoned factory, when suddenly Godzilla shows up. Yes, I know he only disappeared 10 seconds ago, but that goes to show how long, and more importantly, irrelevant this whole prison escape B-plot is. But Godzilla's not alone, as Angrius shows up as well. The two kaiju duke it out for quite a bit before they destroy an oil tanker, setting off massive fires. Godzilla takes advantage of this and severely wounds Angrius, before burning him to a crisp. Satisfied, the Big G disappears, leaving a ruined, burning Osaka behind him. A while after this, they manage to find Godzilla again, this time on a course to Shinko Island. A new plan is set in place. The pilots will bomb the entrance to a valley that Godzilla's heading towards, trapping him there until they can find a permanent way to stop him. The plan is set in motion, but unfortunately, Kobayashi crashes his planes and dies. However, his sacrifice is not in vain, as it causes an avalanche that holds Godzilla in place. With this knowledge, they start a new plan by blowing up deposits of ice in the mountains. This succeeds, and Godzilla is finally defeated, and the movie reaches its end. Okay, now for my thoughts on it. One thing that I was not expecting going into this was that Angrius was going to die at the halfway point. I kinda assumed that it would be like the other Godzilla movies I've seen where he fights another kaiju, in the sense that he would kill them in the final act and have about 3 fights, but this is the first one in which he fights another kaiju, so I assumed that there wasn't a better way to write Angrius out. There's also a random segment which follows some escaped convicts, which I didn't especially care for, but that pales in comparison to the final fight against Godzilla. It's just so repetitive and dull, and it feels like it goes on and on forever. But besides that, this is a really great movie. The fights are cool and have plenty of destruction to entertain you for the full fight, and near the climax of the fight, there's a really detailed look at a building simultaneously collapsing and flooding which blew me away. I also noticed how in the first Godzilla movie, they slowed down the footage to make him seem more heavy, but in this one, they speed up the fights, which is painfully obvious but still has its charm. The dialogue is pretty serviceable, and the human side is pretty good, none of which are especially highlights, but then again, that's not what we watch these movies for. The effects are just as good as the first one, if not better, with some integrated stop motion and better shots of the monsters, but the half hour following the evacuation and shutdown of Osaka was hard to watch due to the darkness of it. It's probably because the version I watched had less pixels than the average game of Tetris, but it was pretty hard to identify objects for about a third of the movie. I'm also especially fond of the ice boulders for some reason. Something about them is incredibly satisfying to me. It's definitely not as good as its predecessor, but it doesn't drag on for too long or put a noticeable dip in quality for the franchise, so it's worth a watch if you enjoyed the first one and want more of that version of Goji. I think its flaws are pretty understandable when you consider that this was released less than a year after Godzilla 1954. But anyway, that's it for this video. If this seems shorter than my other videos recently, that's probably because it was. I'm aiming for an average of 10 minutes runtime for the majority of my Godzilla movie reviews as there's a lot to get through, but I won't trim down parts of my videos or try to pad out the runtime, so take that with a grain of salt. Also, I don't like to ask you to subscribe, would you please consider it? We're so close to hitting 100 subscribers and I'd love to do that before the 1 year anniversary of the channel. Next week, we'll be reviewing the original King Kong vs. Godzilla, so keep an eye out for that if you're interested. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you all later.